All right, so let's talk Trump tariffs. And I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of who is getting what percentage, but there's a couple of interesting tidbits that just came out. First off, for those who don't know, tariffs are just a tax. And it's not on the country that the tariffs are on, it's on imports from that country. So, say you buy your avocados from Mexico, you pay the tariff that is imposed on Mexico. Um, because most businesses pass on, if not all, at least some of their tax onto the customer. So, with that in mind, let's talk about something a little fun before we get into the absolutely bonkers way of how the Trump administration came to the conclusion that these were reciprocal tariffs. All right, let us begin with an article from CNBC. These bizarre locations have been hit by Trump's tariffs, including an uninhabited island. Well, to be fair, Trump did say all countries, so he wasn't kidding, but I'm pretty sure he's not aware that he put tariffs on countries that are uninhabited, because he came upon this bizarre idea of how to decide on tariffs to begin with. I mean, 10% is borderline for all countries. And then they did the bizarro formula, but still, not all countries have people in them, and not all countries, even where there are people, say the Arctic, are trading with the US. So, yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of stupid to put tariffs on a country that doesn't actually trade with us. How is this showing toughness? This is just showing you don't know how basic geography works. All right. So let's start with the key points. U.S. President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs hit major trading partners on Wednesday, but some tiny islands and remote locations were also on the firing line. And I just got breaking news that the Dow drops 1,600 points. S&P 500 heads towards biggest loss since 2020. All the results of these absolutely bonkers tariffs. But anyway, continuing on with the article, the newly elected White House leader set a baseline tariff rate of 10% across the board, with a raft of levies affecting over 180 countries. Some of the strangest locations affected include an uninhabited island near Antarctica and a military base on the Indian Ocean. All right. I would love to know whose military base it is. Actually, wouldn't surprise me if it was ours. U.S. President Donald Trump's aggressive and far-reaching reciprocal tariffs were signed into effect on Wednesday, hitting over 180 countries, ranging from major trading partners to remote islands. The newly elected White House leader unveiled a raft of levies on April 2nd, marking the date as Liberation Day, and set a baseline tariff of 10% on goods imported to the U.S. across the board. Key trade partners absorbed some of the steepest tariff rates, from 34% on China, 20% on the European Union, 46% on Vietnam, and 32% on Taiwan. Trump and the White House shared a series of charts on social media detailing the tariffs applied to each country affected. Strikingly, near the end of the list were a series of remote, uninhabited Australian islands, offshore territories, and even a military base. Because neither Trump nor the morons who came up with this plan probably are even aware of what countries we actually trade with, because that would involve due diligence and a modicum of intelligence. All right, the Heard and McDonald's Islands. An external Australian territory, the Heard and McDonald's Islands are located 4,100 kilometers from Perth in Western Australia and 1,700 kilometers from Antarctica. The territory is considered one of the remotest locations on Earth with rare, pristine island ecosystems, according to UNESCO World Heritage Convention, and it is populated by a number of species, including flying birds, penguins, seals, and invertebrates. Notice humans was not one of the species on this island. To reach the islands, it takes a 2-week boat voyage from Perth, meaning visits are rare. Despite having no economic activity, Heard and McDonald's Islands were hit with 10% tariffs on Wednesday. All right, Norfolk Island and Cocos Island. A number of other Australian territories were barraged with tariffs, including Norfolk Island with a population of nearly 2,000 people, Cocos Island with a population of just 544, and Christmas Island, which is populated by 1,692 people. Norfolk Island was hit with some of the highest duties of 29%, despite Australia only facing 10% levies. Because that makes sense. The U.S. is one of its top trading partners, with 31% of its exports heading to the States, according to the CIA. Meanwhile, Cocos Island and Christmas Island are facing 10% tariffs. Now, that's confusing. Are we talking about Australia being one of its top trading partners, or Norfolk Island? I'm pretty sure it's Australia. Norfolk Island has got a 29% tariff. I'm not quite sure that Norfolk Island, with respect to it, is a trade competitor with the giant economy of the United States, but that just shows and exemplifies the fact that nowhere on earth is safe from this, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said, according to The Guardian. All right, the British Indian Ocean Territory. The British Indian Ocean Territory is an overseas British territory with no permanent population, but its largest island, Diego Garcia, has a joint UK-US military facility inhabiting about 4,000 people, mainly consisting of military personnel. The territory is a major exporter of fish, with the U.S. being a top destination, according to the Observatory of Economic Complexity. It's been hit with 10% tariffs. Well, at least it exports to the U.S., which is a lot better than, say, an uninhabited island. So, this is an improvement. All right, Reunion Island. A French overseas territory in the Indian Ocean, Reunion is facing staggering duties of up to 37%, while the European Union has been hit with tariffs of 20%. Reunion has a population of roughly 882,000 per the latest data. And you're going to see in the next article how these absolutely cuckoo bananas numbers were decided upon. And it's cuckoo bananas. Tokolo. Tokolo is a dependent territory, or is it Tukalu? I don't know. A dependent territory of New Zealand in the southern Pacific Ocean, has a population of just over 1,600 per the CIA and is facing 10% tariffs. The region is made up of 3 coral atolls, um, Bakuofo, Atafu, and Nuku, oh boy, Nukunonu. Nukunonu, okay. And is not an easy place to get to, with no harbors, ports, or airports. Travelers would have to take a ship from Samoa, which runs every 2 weeks, and undertake a journey of roughly 24 to 36 hours. All right, and that is all there is on that article. So let's move to CNN and find out how these cuckoo bananas numbers were decided upon. This is the dubious way Trump calculated his reciprocal tariffs. Because in a normal world, you would, look at the percentage of tariffs placed on the U.S. by certain countries, adding up all the industries and coming up with a number. You would think that would make the most sense because that would be reciprocal. They put 25% tariffs on this industry. We reciprocate with 25% tariffs on their, if not the same industry, a one that is closest to it. But no, that's not how this worked. That would make way too much sense. President Donald Trump's massive tariffs announced on dozens of nations Wednesday were pitched as reciprocal, matching what other countries charge the United States dollar for dollar, even taking into account non-tariff barriers like value-added taxes and other such measures. But the actual calculation the Trump administration used is not reciprocal at all. Matching countries' Matching countries' tariffs dollar for dollar is an incredibly difficult task, involving poring over each country's tariff schedule and matching a complex array of products, each of which has a different charge for any variance. Instead, the Trump administration used quite a simple calculation. The country's trade deficit divided by its exports to the United States times 1/2. That's it. The calculation was first suggested by journalist James Surowiecki in a post on X and backed up by Wall Street analysts. The Trump administration later confirmed that was a calculation it used. For example, America's trade deficit with China in 2024 was $295.4 billion, and the United States imported $439.9 billion worth of Chinese goods. That means China's trade surplus with the United States was 67% of the value of its exports, a value the Trump administration labeled as tariffs charged to USA. Only if you don't know what tariffs are and how anything works. I'm not an economist. Numbers hurt my head. I even know that that's bullshit. While these new tariff measures have been framed as reciprocal tariffs, it turns out the policy is actually one of surplus targeting, noted Mike O'Rourke, chief marketing strategist at Jones Trading, in a note to investors Wednesday. There does not appear to have been any tariffs used in the calculations of the rate. The Trump administration is specifically targeting nations with large trade surpluses with the United States relative to their exports to the United States, he added. The simple calculation used by the Trump administration could have broad implications for countries America depends on for goods and the global companies that supply them. Knowing how these rates were calculated highlights that they are generally going to be most severe on the nations that U.S. companies rely heavily upon in their supply chain, O'Rourke said. Translation, they're putting higher tariffs on the countries where we don't produce the goods that we're getting from these countries. It is hard to imagine how these tariffs would not wreak havoc upon the profit margins of major multinational corporations. And that is the end of that article. And all I can say is maybe once corporations start whining and rich people start whining, maybe Trump will finally get it through his thick skull that he's actually not just hurting everyday Americans, which he has already said, he literally said he does not give a shit about. He is also hurting rich people. And like I said, that's probably the only thing that would stop this madness is the hurt that rich people are going to be getting through. I don't know if they need an economist. I saw a TikTok where a former Trump advisor had to really dumb down in really complicated concepts, like if we pull out of Afghanistan too fast, the terrorists will think we are losers. So that is how he gets his briefings, in really dumbed down language. And as we all know, all you have to do is look at all those people who scream basic biology when it comes to trans people or basically any complicated biology, to know that if you dumb down a concept too far, then you're not really giving a good rundown of what's actually happening. Because it's great to get them to understand really basic ideas like, let's not give the Taliban everything at once and complicated things. But this is just insane. So, yeah, someone has to find a way to dumb down economics to this genius, who I might add has not had a business that hasn't gone bankrupt, including fucking casinos. Seriously, how do you manage to bankrupt a casino? The whole idea is to make sure the house wins. How the hell can you be so bad at business that you bankrupt a casino? But anyway, so somebody needs to do something similar in the economics front to dumb it down to Trump speak. So maybe it'll get through to Trump that what he's doing is not just hurting Americans, definitely not just hurting the rest of the world, because we know he doesn't give a shit about that, but he's also hurting the very people that he claims to actually give a shit about. Possibly show him his own portfolio and show why he's losing money. It's not because of anything nefarious. It's because he doesn't understand how basic economics works. He decided to target tariffs and completely missed the mark. Now, in most administrations, you would have someone who actually knows how economics works. So they would be able to do those calculations and figure out, these are the tariffs that are placed on us. This is how much in reciprocal tariffs we need to put on. And I know that he has businessmen in his cabinet. The one place having a bunch of businessmen in the government would actually do everybody a favor, because you would think that they would know what they're talking about. and they come up with this bullshit? I mean, what is going on? So, of course, the stock market tanked. Of course, the Republicans who were beating their chests before this about how the stock market is king and we should, put everything into the stock market, including Social Security, now say the stock market doesn't predict shit. And that, Main Street doesn't care about Wall Street and blah, 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 blah. Pick one. Either the economy isn't Wall Street, which isn't completely false, or it is. And you just done royally fucked up. But they have to now change course because the stock market is in free fall. Simply because we are being run by a bunch of morons. And like I said, this should be the part where businessmen should do well. Howard Lutnick, Scott Bessent, they should understand economics well enough to, not necessarily Trump, because like I said, he managed to bankrupt casinos, so he's a moron. But you would think that they, as successful businessmen, should probably understand how tariffs work. Because finance and economy. So, yeah. And actually, Scott Bessent warned the rest of the world not to do what we're doing. It's like, okay, we just angrily put a bunch of tariffs on you, but don't you dare do the same thing to us. So, yeah, they're just doubling down, which is awesome. Anyway, that is all I have for this video. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.